21st chapter of the book of Tehillim, Lamatseach Mizmor Lidavid. Like yesterday's chapter for the leader of the choir, the conductor, the symphony, all of them. For Salzburg, the city of music. Adonai ba'ozcha yismach melech uvishuatcha ma yagel ma'od. Oh God, the King, rejoice in your strength. How great he exults in your victory. Ta'avat libo natatalo. You granted him the desire of his heart. The areshet sifatav bal manata sela. And you have not denied the request of his lips. And then this word sela, forever, or a musical notation. We said we don't know exactly what it means. So here, it's talking about how God helps the king. Call it David victorious in his many wars. And these, verse 3, you may be familiar with these two words, areshet sifatav. We use the word areshet sifatayim multiple times on Rosh Hashanah, right after the blowing of the shofar, as we ask God to not deny the request of our lips. Continuing in verse 4, Ki tikad menu birchot tov, tashit lirosho ateret paz. You have given him blessings. You've given him good things. You've set on his head a crown of the finest gold. And so the God is making the king great. Chayim sha'al mimcha natatalo. He asked you for life, and you gave it to him. Orech yamim olam va'ed. You gave it to him, right? A long life, and we can understand this also in a way that maybe the Davidic dynasty, that yes, David, of course, dies, but la'olam va'ed, the Davidic dynasty remains. That's what Rashi says about it, that it's referring back to when God says that to David. Continuing in verse 6, Gadol kvodo bishuatecha, hod v'hadar tishaveh alav. Great and honor, right? Great glory comes to him through your victory. God is the one who's victorious. Hod v'hadar tishaveh alav. You have given him, you have endowed him with splendor and majesty. Ki tishitehu v'chot la'ad. You've made his blessings that go on la'ad, forever. You've showered him with blessings. Techadehu v'simcha et panecha. You made his face happy. You gave him joy because of your presence. Ki hamelech boteach b'Adonai uv'chesed elyon bal yimot. Because the king trusts in God through all of his faithfulness of the Elyon, of the eternal, of the one who's most high, he will not be shaken. And here, that passage sort of changes. Up to this point, where we're talking about what God gives to the king, to the Melech. We think about some of the earlier chapters, we talk about the glory of God. God, don't let it look like the wicked are victorious, because then it doesn't look like you are God and you are in charge and that you're doing anything. And here, through the victory and through the success of the Judaic king, call him a descendant of David. We'll call him one of the righteous descendants of David. That brings God glory through that, and God has given it. But now in verse 8, right? Why is the king being given all these things from God? We just read, because the king trusts in God. The king trusts in the faithful, is faithful to the one who's most high, and he will not be shaken. And in many ways, we've described David sort of in that way very, very often. David, yes, he makes mistakes. He makes terrible, terrible error. And God punishes him terribly for the sleeping with Bathsheba and the killing of Uriah. But David always remains loyal to God, no matter what, in any case, in any situation. There, he's told that he sinned. He accepts his punishment from God, and that's part of his life. Continuing in verse 9, your hand is equal to all of your enemies. Your right hand overpowers your foes. Tishitemo kitanor eish le'et panecha, Adonai be'apo yival aim, v'tochlaim eish. What do you do to your enemies? You set them on fire like a furnace. Right? Your presence is so strong. Think of the ideas of Har Sinai. Har Sinai, Bo'er Ba'esh, right? Har Sinai was lit with fire. God's presence came down. Nobody could be on that mountain because God's presence is it's so dynamic, and it's so, in a sense, destructive. And so here, when God shows his presence like a furnace, God's, and your anger, you destroy them. The fire consumes them. Piryamo me'eretz te'abed, v'zar'am mibnei adam. You wipe their offspring from the earth, their issue from among men. Let's take a second. We've had many chapters like this in earlier books, Yeshaya, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel. The good thing here is it's not about the destruction that's going to come to Bnei Yisrael. So at least we can take that a little bit of solace, whether or not you like this sort of, justice, as it's referred to, Old Testament justice. I don't know if it's just in the Old Testament, and I don't know if the people who only keep the Old Testament are so good at that justice. It seems like many of the others who don't follow the Old Testament are very good at that type of justice, and have been historically. But right, God, here, this destruction is coming to the enemies of the Jews. Piryamo, we're in verse 11, Pasuk Yud Aleph, Me'eretz te'abed, v'zar'am mibnei adam. You wipe their offspring from the earth. You wipe all of their seed is gotten rid of. Kinatu alecha ra. Now, why is God doing this? Because they schemed against you. Chashvu mizima bal yuchalu. They had plans, they laid plans, but they could not succeed. And we think about, again, to some of the past chapters, we talked about comparing the wicked to the lion who's waiting and hiding, who's scheming at night, and different ways it was described, until that moment that they can come out and do something evil, do something bad. So here it's saying that those plans, that those plots, that those schemes will not come through. Ki tishitemo shechem, what do you do, God? You turn them back, right? Your bows are aimed at their face. The army sees it, and they turn back. We saw that the other day with the idea of the Oref, that we should last see their Oref. They're going to turn around. We'll see the back of their neck, a similar idea. Ruma Adonai be'uzecha, nashira unizamra givuratecha. So be strong, God. Right? Be exalted through your strength, and we will sing and chant the praises of your mighty deeds. We'll sing about the victories that you have given us. So this psalm is right, the first part about sort of how the king is successful. We'll call it a king from the Davidic dynasty, and because of that, God is, in a sense, God is successful also. And you can think of it in a sense, almost a continuation of the previous parak of Tehillim. There we talk about shouting for victory, and it's talking about, right? It's talking about war. It's talking about the army. And it's talking about how the Jews have to trust in God. Right, in Pasuk Chet, in yesterday's chapter, they come with their horses of chariot, and what is, not that we don't have horses and chariots, but what do we believe will give us strength is calling out in the name of God. Now, calling out in the name of God, to me, doesn't mean much. It's about calling out in the name of God. We've seen many times that God only listens based upon people's correct, moral, ethical, equitable behavior. So here, the God who we're told in the last chapter, and the last chapter, continuing that last chapter, it ends, Adonai Yoshia HaMelech Yanenu Biyom Korenu, right? The king will answer us when we call. It starts with the king, and then this chapter, therefore, continues with that, with the idea of the king and the victories that come and the shouting and the joy. So there are some aspects. It's hard to figure out. The reason I say that, it's hard to figure out the ordering of the words of Tehillim. Why is this one here? Why is that one here? We said on the first chapter that there's similarities between the first chapter of the book of Tehillim and the first chapter, the early chapters, the book of Yoshua. Even the first chapter, the idea of studying Torah day and night and different things. So we understood that. But after that, why some of the why is 8 next to 9? Why is 12 next to 13? Why are these ones not later in the book? So some of them make sense why they're next to each other. All the hallelujahs, all the Shir HaMa'alot, but many of the others do not. And so trying to, figure out, maybe that's part of the reasons, this connection with this idea of the Melech, the king. We call out to him. He helps the human king, and that demonstrates the glory of the eternal king.